Next, I want to return to the issue of kicks. And we started with the side kick, which is in many ways the easiest kick to do in Yiquan. Therein lies a couple of issues. One is that when we see people do other kinds of kicks, like front kick or round kick, it's like a watermark. It's an indication of someone's level and how far they've progressed in their cultivation in the structural movement paradigm. Can they bring that into front kicks, round kicks, and other things that we do with the legs that I'll talk about in a moment? And very often the answer is no. And what we see is people, maybe they'll just do like a kind of bog standard round kick and just call it an Yiquan round kick for no reason, because they practice Yiquan and they're doing a round kick and they think that must be an Yiquan round kick. So we have to get past that. We have to get kind of past the halo effect of like, just because someone might be quite famous and they do a round kick doesn't mean that it's an Yiquan round kick. And instead we've got to start thinking, is it a structural movement round kick? Is it a round kick that follows the principles of Yiquan? And there's another issue that's kind of flagged up by that, and that's people who say that something isn't in Yiquan. Well, that obviously contradicts Wang Qiangjai, who says Yiquan is all techniques and no techniques. There's a couple that I've seen, like one person saying there's no round kicks in Yiquan, which is nonsense, and another person saying that Yiquan's just short range, so to be able to do movements longer range, you need to compensate with learning other kinds of martial arts. I've got no problem whatsoever with learning other kinds of martial arts. It's going to be essential for things like incorporating Yiquan into ground fighting and stuff like that. But that's just not true. Like, I mean, and why would it be? So if your punch is like this, well, you can make it longer, you can make your stance longer. And for both of these, like round kick and longer range movements, well, what is it I'm doing then when I do that thing? When I'm doing structural movement bigger, and what is it that they're doing that they can't do that, or they can't just lengthen their movement? So too often people fail to acknowledge that what they're talking about is their own limitations. Anyway, just like basic punches, we want to start with a few basics that we can then progress. We pretend it's that simple at the start. You know, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We pretend it's that simple at the start, and very similarly, the idea of a front kick, a round kick, and a side kick. We pretend that's all it is. Now remember, Yao Zhongzun talks about the idea that a punch is just volley with the fist, and that's a very similar thing with the leg. And one of the reasons that he says that is he doesn't want us to get trapped in that paradigm of thinking that, you know, these are just the techniques, the punches, the basic punches, or even the basic kicks. Once we start developing the ability to use like fast, powerful, short movement, which I note that a lot of people are talking about this at the moment, so some interest is being raised in this, but there's not a lot of people who can really demonstrate it in any kind of practical or convincing way. We need to think about who we're giving our support to. Anyway, the idea is that there's an infinite number of things that we can do with our legs if we want to like release force, you know, like, and just small movements, small but powerful movements that can vary in terms of power. Like, you know, big front kick is powerful. That I've just done isn't that powerful. But a lot depends on context. If your leg is touching someone's leg and you're holding it and you just release force a little bit with the leg, you can move their leg and so on. And then extending those movements. So we want into the, you know, the leg sweeps, the calf kicks that have become super popular now in MMA. They're usually the standard now for like people. So it's another interesting parallel with each one, and the idea of having your foot forward in a basic guard. Now if people have this kind of side-on boxing stance like that, the idea is that you use these calf kicks like that, but they're usually currently very swingy in like that. And I think, again, this is one of the things where this is really useful. This is practical, it's useful, and it's something that can be incorporated. They've got you want to go for the calf kick, you want to do it fast. We want to get the short, sharp movement in, the truncated movement to the centre line, and do it like that rather than, you know, the big football. So these ideas and these techniques and this way of moving, it's going to come into its own very, very soon. I think people are going to start seeing the value of it. Wang Shunjai's dream vision is going to come true. And there's multiple things that we can do around that, and we'll look at them at another time. Release force out, you know, forward, back is harder, that's the hardest one. And these all extend into different like kinds of kicks and stomps and sweeps, especially, that we can do with the feet. So it's not just about kicks. And then on the other side of the coin, also there's a range of like kind of fancy kicks and cool kicks and big kicks that play a role if you want to bring it into sport, and they also play a role in terms of individual athleticism. If you can do these things, if you can do them, why not? It's all about exploring your body and what you can do and extending your ability. So that's a lot of talk yet again. Let's think about, first of all, the front kick. And again, we assume our basic stance. And the first thing that we want to think about is that we'll start with the back leg front kick. The back leg's going to come through, and this swing through is going to add some power. It doesn't add as much power as people think. So I think a lot of people think like when there's power in a kick, they're always focusing on like, can I get this swing through? Can I get this swing through faster? In Yiquan, what we want is this turn around the central axis, this rotational Farley that we've talked about. So really good exercise that you can do, I'll come back to it later, is like lifting and just turning like that, using the rotational. And this is where the power is really going to be generated from. This is going to add something. This is going to add something to it, swinging through and then timing it into the rotational axis. And that's what we're going to talk about first. So remember we said that the leg lifts up. Oh, I should say before even saying that, like, you know, these are quite athletic movements and you really do need to work on flexibility. And I think very often when people say, oh, there isn't these kind of movements in each one, it's because they're not athletic enough to do it, which is fine. It's not for everyone. You don't need to learn these things. Pick and choose what you need to do. There's a range of people who are learning each one, from the people who want to do like full contact competition right through to people who just want to do some kind of health and well-being. So I've said before, the issue isn't like, that isn't the issue. The issue is when people who are just doing health and well-being like want to represent themselves as the people who like want to do real serious fight training. That's an issue. Anyway, we lift up for those people who do want to do this. We'll assume that you do, and you're athletic enough and you've warmed up, and we'll talk about flexibility in a moment. So the leg lifts up. Remember our key principle that we lift the leg when we're doing kicks, and even if we're going to kick down with the side kick, where is he? There you are. Even if we're going to kick down, the left lifts up first. Yes, it does, doesn't it? We cock our leg. Is that what you tried to tell me? We cock our leg. In other words, you want to go out. Or you just tell me that you love me. We'll go out in a minute. Go on. Don't go for that nut shot. So the leg lifts up. The leg lifts up like this, and it lifts up like that. See, our front foot is pointing forwards. Mate, it's too dangerous. You're going to have to go out. Go on, please. Go on. Lifts up. It lifts up like this, and at this point, keeping our rear foot pointing forward like that. Not like kind of traditional wushu where you have it pointed down for a lot of postures like that. So it lifts up, and this is a good exercise just to practice on itself. And there's two ways of practicing this exercise, by the way. One is just lift up, and the other is to lift up like that. And practice both. But the way we kick, usually we're not going to go 1, 2 out like that. We're going to go 1, 2 out like that. Again, that's a compromise. Like it can be a little bit more powerful because you can get a little bit of a slingshot rebound thing if you do it out and in and then out, but it's too slow and it's too likely to hit the opponent's leg or something like that. Remember, we want to lift our legs up over the opponent's legs. So we lift it up, and the foot is pointing forwards towards the target like that. And then from there, we just want to turn on the axis, just like with the side kick. Just like with the side kick, we just turn like that on the axis. Now, not everyone does this. Not everyone does this movement where it's one open with the hips. We'll come back to in a second. Some people just do it like that forward. And remember when we talked about the idea of our horizontal axis and we were doing the exercise with the headbutt and throwing the body weight forward like that. There are some really good kickers who do it like this. They do a kick and they get the power in because they make all the energy go forward for one thing. So you move forward with it a bit and get some momentum from the moving the mass forwards on the kick and leaning forward in with the body weight like that. So you kind of add that into the kick like that. Into the kick like that, and you can get a really good kick doing it like that. One of the reasons we don't want that is we want to do so much more with our legs that doing that we can't do it like the same way. Like if we want to do for example, if I want to do the calf kick, I need to open or the dog kick as it's sometimes known, for dogs who refuse to get out of the way. We can't really do that like that. The posture goes wrong like that, so we want to do it like that. So this becomes our core, our foundation training. And I think like for most people, 95% of people, we could demonstrate, get them on the bag, get them doing it different ways. They will find it easier to get power doing it this way with the foot, with the twist routing, the bug crushing routing. So it lifts, and the hips open, the way we want to do it. Lift, and look, as we lift in, we're going to lean forward a little bit into the posture as well, because we want that as well. And also when we hit, we don't want to push ourselves off it. So we use our mass energy going forward. Remember our key Yiquan concepts that everything is being used that we possibly can to get as much possible force as we possibly can into the technique. This idea that comes from the reality of an actual life or death fight, where the longer it goes on, the more the odds are not in our favour. The more, if the odds are less than 50-50 anyway, because we've suddenly been attacked, we're suddenly forced into a fight that we don't want to be into because we're wushu heroes, we wouldn't be out bullying anyone. We're suddenly forced into it for some reason. So all our psychological stuff is wrong, all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, I'm in this fight. So it's not even 50-50, like it's like 70-30 that it's going to go against us. And the longer that we're in that fight, the more opportunity there is for those odds to play out. So we want to hit as hard as we possibly can immediately. So we use this idea of maximising every possible ounce of force, and that's over-determined because it forces us to improve our structural movement paradigm, which then feeds back into a lot of other things like being able to reduce the parts of the movement to make them much smaller. And that's also interesting about this movement, because actually this is a small movement. Even though it looks like a massive movement because the big leg is sticking out, actually the power's just coming from this very standard use of the rotational far limb. So one, we time it like that. And this is a lot harder than it looks. There's a lot of things to keep in mind. So first of all, look at the lean forward. There's a little bit of a lean forward into it. And again, this is something a bag or a pad, someone holding a big square pad, that will teach you, because you'll just bounce off it if you don't do this. Even if you release loads of force, even if you get Wang Xingjia level boom force, if you're leaning back, all you're going to do is propel yourself back, just as if you put your foot on the wall, just push yourself back like that. So we want this leaning, and we also usually again want just like a little bit of a skip in. We'll talk about skip in a moment. So we time it, we lift, and this is all about timing. And remember, I talked about one of the key things with kicks is timing, getting the different parts of the movement right. And you'll feel it yourself when you come to practice it. This classic thing where 1 out of 8, or for ages, none will be right, and then 1 out of 8 will be right, and be like, that's it. That's one of the things where it is really useful to have a coach to just reassure you, yes, that was it. Because very often you get so much more power into it that you fall over and you think that was more wrong than ever. It's like, no, you totally misunderstood. That was better than ever. The power was suddenly there, the power generation. We see this over and over again in each one. The power generation is there, but the structure is not good enough to contain it, to balance it out. You're not making enough compromises around structure. So 1 out of 8 will be right, and then 3 out of 8, and then 7 out of 8, and then 1 out of 50 will be wrong. So we time it, and look at the timing. You can practice like timing like that. Try and get the timing. Again, this Yiquan principle of the harmony of the, I always say, when I look back at the videos, I'm always saying the harmony of the hand and the fist, when I mean the hand and the foot. But in this case, I mean the foot and the foot again. When the foot hits the target, the foot turns around like that, and you can hear it. Now I've got a video where I say you can hear good structure, where I'm doing kicks and you can hear the heel from where it locks into the posture. You can hear the boom on the floor. Boom's a bit of an exaggeration. When I say lock, remember body consistency. It's not locked out against the bones. So 1 like that. Now look at what we do. Start from our quad in, lifts, and we push in with the lead hip like that. It's like we push in and we really open the quad into the kick. And what we're going to do is get like quite a straight line. It's not going to be completely straight. For front kicks and for round kicks, round kicks are a little bit more like side kick. They're a little bit more straight on. But for front kick, this angle will be a little bit like that, right? It'll be a little bit that way rather than completely flat. What I mean is like when everything's out like that, the line, it would be misleading to say that all of these are in a completely straight line. For front kick, it's kind of like that. And then for side kick, then they're all, the quad is completely flat. So both hips are in a flat line with the rest of the foot. For the front kick, they're just still a little bit in like that. And that's just basic physiology that an average leg, you just lose the power like that. You just lose the springy structure in the power. If you go, it's too much, and that leads us into the idea that, well, not the idea, the understanding that this is very much a flexibility issue as well. So you need this hip flexibility in order to be able to do this kick properly, and that is also a really common problem. The people go like that and they can't, like the angle here of the hips relative to the leg. See, the leg is there, but the angle of the hip is quite strong, and we need to flatten that angle a lot more, and that's a hip flexibility issue. So, you know, all those practicing your leg stretches and things like that, flexibility is really important for being able to develop this skill. Even more so because we want to really release force with it, so if there's too much tension in the quad area, then you can really hurt yourself. You will anyway. You'll hurt yourself anyway, forever. You know, over the many years of training, loads of times like something just pings and what's that? And the muscle just goes a little bit wrong. The amount of force that we can generate is unbelievable. It's just inevitable that some things we're gonna have training injuries. So we lift and we open. We don't try and get this completely flat in line like a side kick. We keep this like that. So this is like on a bit of an angle to that. And we lean in with it like that. We try and get the timing. That's where we release force around the rotational axis, the vertical axis, the rotational Farley, and the axis is like leaning in a little bit with the kick. It's leaning a little bit to get this counterbalance onto the amount of force we're going to generate like that, kicking in. Come back to what that foot's doing in a moment. When this turns, it turns on the ball of the foot. When you're practicing it, just turn on the ball of the foot, like I said before, like a pinball paddle, like that. Just turns in on the ball of the foot. And you have to just lift the heel up lift the heel up to do that like that. When you're practicing very relaxed, one, like, I'll do the way. No, look, I'm lifting my leg right up like that. Right up. So all my force is going straight out like that. It's not being like if I'm lifting up like that, and as I hit the contact point like that, a lot of force is just being dissipated that could have gone directly into the target. Instead, it's not going to hit and go up like that. We want it in, boom, and we want to push all the power into the target rather than just going up the body a little bit like that. Lift it, and this makes it much easier because now it's just directly out like that. Yeah. We lift out. Everything's just 1, 2. It's just a completely flat. It's not. Also, of course, we get this big coil up to boom, to just use the explosiveness from the knee and the hip to boom, add a little bit more into this movement, which does play a part. And it's a little bit like when you time it right, sort of Farley interlinks perfectly with the timing. Have you been to the fair where you go on a Wurlitzer and you sit down and it goes round like that, and one of the people who work at the fair jump up behind you, and as you're going round the thing, they go and they just add that little bit of zing onto it, and it just massively improves the speed that you're going around, and it breaks your neck or something like that. It's very much like release force like that. Timing. 1, 2. Open the quad. Push in with the hip. It feels like you're pushing in with the hip. And again, this is a flexibility issue because your leg's got to come up. As your leg starts coming up here, you start feeling the leg is more kind of bounded. It's more contracted than the thigh, rather the top of the thigh. Feels like there's more going on here, preventing its movement because the leg is coming up and contracting the muscle, and also you're leaning in like that, which adds to the effect. So again, that's a flexibility issue, and also it's one of those kind of odd flexibility issues where you can get a cramp because the muscle's being pushed together like that. So we lift and we push out. Now what makes this a lot easier, this twist routing or bug crushing routing, is if you jump. It's if you jump and lift all your weight with the posture first. It reduces the friction on the twist, and it's surprising how much of a difference that makes to the overall speed of the movement. And also, if you jump right by kind of very release force movement, you're already adding force into the speed. So you're speeding up by using. Remember when it talks about that with the lead leg kick, that the first use of explosive force is from the foot. 1, 2. It's not just explosive force in one thing. So when people talk about Farley, it's like it's almost, well, it is. It's sociologically fascinating to see people talking about Farjin and Farley and all the theories that they're coming out with, and what's wrong with people? All these fantasy nonsense things, and they know they can't even do it themselves. Yeah. Oh. It's all about, listen, right, if you want to be special, learn the real thing. That's what Wushu is in a boring, alienating world. Wushu is this amazing pearl right in the middle of it. It's all based on real stuff, and that's what makes it valuable. There's no shortcuts. It's like a little explosion going off. It's a bit of a tasteless description, I know, but it's Wang Shengji's own description, that the movement, like within the structural movement paradigm, is like, it's like everything's like a little explosion going off, and it's the same like from the lead leg side kick when I was talking about. You lift fast, release force, that's like a little explosion off the floor and then a little explosion out like that. So it's not just one Farley, it's 1, 2 like that. Similarly, when we jump, this is the first use of explosive force into the lift the leg up like that, and that's another really key exercise that we want to practice like that. Explosive leg lift and then into the kick. And you can imagine, to time all of that and then also release rotational Farley. So this explosive leg lift is horizontal, using the horizontal axis, kind of linear Farley, where it's like that, leaning forward like to get the quack goes in and the leg lifts. And that is rotational Farley or centrifugal Farley. I think everyone gets the idea with that, so I'm just going to call it rotational Farley. One, this is the first Farley, up to here using the horizontal axis. This is the second using the rotational axis. Then it hits the lock point, and remember I said there are lock points in kicks. One, but usually because of the way we try to counterbalance the weight, we don't hold them for too long. And when it's done fast, it creates a very specific kind of structural movement that's instantly recognisable. You can go and see, I do it all the time. So I've got tons and tons of videos of me doing these kind of kicks. And I think when you see people in action, so actually you see a lot of, certainly elite Sandar, you see doing this, but also actually a lot of elite Muay Thai, particularly from Thailand, really have this really good, this opening of the quad into the kick, like that. I think there's technical differences with the kind of Yiquan way of doing it, that we want this kind of explosive and try to time these two Farleys into one movement, but I mean, you can't argue with it, can you? I mean, there's no question they're making it work, but definitely see very, very, very similar movement. Kind of Muay Thai Buakor, for example, just very much has this movement. So we can see that everything about that movement is based around our structural movement paradigm. It's not just someone doing a front kick and then saying, oh, that's Yiquan. You know, people who, like a lot of people come to Yiquan from other martial arts or other Chinese martial arts, just like I did. Well, I can't really say I've left those other martial arts. Wushu is one art to me. Well, not just to me, it is. Wushu is one art, so that's something we need to understand. But they kind of do the kick like they've always done it. And then they'll say, well, I'm doing some kind of Mosabu, I'm doing some kind of slow movement with the leg to train it, and that somehow makes it Yiquan. They've got to think beyond that. I want people to evolve beyond that. Look at the sophistication of the ideas that are being explained and start to integrate them better. As well as practicing lifting up like that, we can also practice lift the leg out like that, and obviously balance, matrix, lift the leg up like that, balance, and then just practice we can practice just lift the leg up like that and just practice on the spot like that. One, breaking it down into two movements, two, like that. Also, that's really good to do on the bag as well. When you do it on the bag, that really helps you train the exact kind of leaning that you need to make it work. One thing we haven't discussed is which part of the foot do you hit with? And the answer is you can hit with any part of the bottom of the foot, really, but ideally we want to think about hitting with the ball of the foot, pulling the toes back like a classic karate kick like that. Karate kick tends to be very, very flicky, which is not to look down on it at all. Like that kind of kick's really quick, and it can really get to the, for self-defense, gets to the groin fast, fast kick like that. Generally speaking, for this kind of kick, we want to kick with the ball of the foot, and it gives just like a little bit of. And it gives a little bit of extra distance for one thing. So if we one like that, we can see that the foot is, if we pull back like that, we lose that distance. But if we put the foot out, pull my toes back like that, not so easy to do in your Feiyus. And that's how we think about it. And it just gives us that little bit of extra push. And again, that's like the strain on the calf when you do that, because that's where the pressure will be. Some strength training on the calf, but more important than anything, learning how to relax in the kick. So here we go on to an entirely different level of cultivation within our structural movement paradigm, the kind of thing we've been talking about. You need the correct consistency so not only is the leg got to be, it's always straight but not straight. It's always, I can't lift this leg. Well, I can do it if I want to, but it hurts. It's just that I've come from training, so my legs are really aching For some reason this leg is feeling much stronger today. So we want to keep it kind of bent, like it's our usual principle of keeping the slightly straight but not straight punch. But we also want to maintain the consistency, the right kind of relaxation and consistency into the. So that's another thing that people do, like, you know, really tense into the kick, really tense into the kick like that. We don't want that. We want to use the weight of the leg to add mass. We don't want to repress our mass. We don't want to repress this equation of mass times. When we do that into the kick, we want the weight of the leg to play a role in it. We don't want to close that down by tightening up so we lose speed in the kick. We want to keep it relaxed. And we want that feeling of you know you're doing it right when you feel like all the muscles are going to shoot off the bone. So we want that. So again, comes back to what else but our standing, to learn how to relax the body properly. If you don't and you tense, not only do you lose speed and power, but that's when you can cause injury really, really easy. And it's much easier to cause an injury to yourself under stress because you tense up. So, and that could be competition or it could be a real fight. And it can just be, to be honest, when someone's filming you or someone's just watching you or someone you quite fancy walks by and you start showing off a little bit and you just get a little bit tenser. It doesn't happen to everyone, but it's really easily done. So we want to learn higher level of relaxation. Having said all that, it's fine to kick with the whole foot and even the heel. So as we go a little bit higher into the body, we might find that we're hitting with the foot and the heel is going in like that. We might find that anyway. So just hitting with the ball of the foot kind of gives us a little bit more distance, and you can definitely use that as your fight IQ and your ability to use distancing gets better. You have a better sense of range that can account for that much distance. So you can really, and also you can foreshorten the movement if you're close enough so that you're just kicking with that ball of the foot. But if it's a bit higher or you really want to go for more of a stomp, you can use the heel, and sometimes it will just happen naturally that the heel will go in like that. You can definitely kick the ball of the foot into the chin. That's happened several times now in UFC that someone's done that. Usually people with a karate background, really effective. Even more impressive is people taking it, kick with the ball of the foot right under the chin, head whack back. They just shake it off. Think about how tough these people are when we start making overblown claims about Yiquan, like people do. What reality do you live in? You know, if you think Yiquan, like you think you're going to beat these people, you might have something that can help these people, but let's keep our respect and our reality goggles firmly in place. So the heel can kick in like that, but usually we don't want that anyway, because when the heel kicks in, the foot gets pushed back a little bit like that, and that can really hurt, and that's something that happens to people all the time when they kick in the bag. So the idea is anyway, you kick with the ball of the foot, but when you kick with the ball of the foot, it kind of makes you want to do that. Makes you want to do that more kind of karate kick like that, which we can use, you know, like each one is all techniques and no techniques, so we can use that no problem. One of the things it's really useful for is like just using the point of the foot up into the groin like that when you're wearing shoes, or you can even do it into the thigh or something like that. Kind of savat, kind of straight in like that. That's a really useful technique. But generally speaking, we want to avoid this thing where it makes you want to kind of do that with the ball of the foot, because it just doesn't feel right at first that you're going to do that and keep the foot back and hit with the ball of the foot. And that's just a matter of practice. I'll come in time, lift straight out, practice. Video yourself, check you're not lifting up like that first. No matter how you do it, lifting up from the ground like that, like up in an arc, like that. We don't want that. We want up. And you can see if they're lifting up in an arc and we do that at the same time, we're already over their kick. And even if they sweep up, they're going to hit our foot, but we're already over it and into the kick. So we want that. That's the kind of kicking you see all the time in stand-up. It's quintessence Chinese Wushu principle. Next, something that is very different in Yiquan usually than, you do see it in Muay Thai, but generally speaking, Muay Thai usually trains one side, and in each one we want to train both sides. They'll never quite be equal, but we can come to that another time. They'll have different strengths, but we want to train both sides because that's part of how we make the footwork paradigm work in reality. It's also how we make the truncated movement I've talked about. The movement is curtailed or truncated like this. That it makes the postures usually just a little bit shorter than if we were fully going to stretch out like that. To get that working, and we need to use footwork, so to make footwork more effective we need to be able to train both sides. It's also more holistic and long term. So in Muay Thai you very often see if they're going to go for the front kick, they'll change like that into the skip, right? And that's a fantastic technique that's provenly effective, you know, in countless videos. So we can do that as well. That's no problem. It's one of our standard drills that we want to come to, and we'll look at in a separate video the standard drills for the kicks. That's one that we want, but we also want to be able to just lift up off the front leg and kick like that. Little landmine goes up. Little landmine goes up for the fast, but it's not 1, 2 like that. It all happens in one. So those 2 Farleys, lift from the horizontal axis, open with the vertical axis. They merge together into one when you do it fast. And exactly the same way, foot wants to come up move up off the floor a little bit, like explosive movement up. And also that jump up can also be, well, it needs to be a jump in as well. Just jumps you in a little bit and you get much more speed on it like that. So all these rules about, everyone's got their rules, haven't they? Rules. You can't leave the floor. You're not rooted to the chi of the earth or something like that. It doesn't work like that at all. When you lift, that force is still there. That force is still there. Your rooting force, real force, like actual momentum off the ground, and you just hit. Doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Of course you can be swept, of course you can be pushed over, but very often the people who say stuff like that, it's fantasy world. It's like fantasy fight league. You can be swept and just your foot on the floor can just be swept. Like it doesn't make any difference. But it does make a difference to is getting the power into the movement, the explosive movement forward usually. We want it backwards as well and sideways. Look at that another time. Explosive movement forward into the posture. It gets the whole thing faster, takes away all friction from it, and just when you're kind of up in the air a little bit, it adds that. You add the Farley and that creates that frictionless release of force. In exactly the same way, the quad opens, but what we need to remember here now is the leg strength that's needed to do this. Very often people haven't got that. It's something that they've got to develop. It partly develops just through practice. This is just kind of weight training in itself. I mean, I'll tell you the secret again. Right, I tried, like Wang Ching, I tried everywhere. I tried tying weights to my leg and doing stuff like this. That doesn't work. Only 2 things work. One, flexibility training to improve your flexibility. And the other thing is learning to relax the thigh muscles properly. Going back to our standing postures. We've not done this one yet. Going back to our Zhang Zhuang postures and learning how to relax properly. That's like doing the weightlifting and all that. I didn't get any effects from it and I had to abandon it. And I really tried, and I tried for about 3 months tying weights and doing stuff like this. Maybe there must have been some muscular gain, but I couldn't get anything like what I needed to get for the lift and the power demonstrator, the kind of thing that my coach could do. I couldn't get it at all. I was like, well, how do you get that? It's like, well, how many times have you been told it? So you get it through standing, like learning how to relax the muscle, because when you're doing weights, okay, you're building muscle strength and that's good if you can learn how to relax it properly. But if you can't, then it's weight and a bit of power, but it's not the kind of force, explosive force that we want. We need to be able, even if it's a big, strong muscle, to relax it properly into the kick. And you only get that through your standing practice. So there is that element to it. And other than that, it's the same posture. Kick out, quad opens, but it doesn't go completely flat like that. It's always on an angle like that. It's just inevitable. Now what will happen here for front and back leg is If people's flexibility is poor, it will start throwing off the kick to the side, usually this way like that, because you try to compensate for the flexibility, but sometimes it can go this way as well like that. It's not an issue of the flexibility of the leg doing that, it's an issue of the flexibility of feeling like you're opening and these muscles here, the inside muscles, the inside thigh muscles, and feeling that they aren't flexible enough to do this posture. And so people will be in their mind, they'll be aiming for it and it'll be going off like that because the hips will be throwing it off. It's partly practice, but it's partly flexibility on the hips that you need to practice to get this right. It doesn't happen to everyone, but seeing it enough times to know that this is, a really common issue. I can't remember if I ever had that issue, so long ago. But it's a really common issue. Front leg and back leg. Other than that, everything's the same. Everything's the same. You can just practice super light like that. Just doing the kicks like that, super light. Like that. Just getting there. And as you get a little bit more confident with it, I'm telling you, you can hurt your hips doing this. So you need to be, and you can do it low as well, so you can do it like that if you're not. That doesn't make any difference to your hips, and that's one of the interesting things when people think flexibility. They think, well, it must be something to do with my leg being up in the air. No, it's the hips flexibility. And you can feel it if you do it like lift and do low like a low stamp. Which is how we would do it, it's perfectly legitimate technique. You can feel straight away it's the hips. It's the hip flexibility is the issue. It doesn't matter how low you do it, it's the hip flexibility that's the issue. There's lots of other variations. I don't want to look at them right now, because I'm really tired from training and I want to also look at round kick. There's lots of other variations. Including jumping much higher with the kick. All different kinds of footwork variations. Some are specific to kicks as well. You can use them for punches, but they're designed particularly for kicks. But jumping up and tucking the other leg like a little bit more of a fancy kick and getting more power out of the jump. All these are perfectly legitimate techniques if you can do them, if you're athletic enough. I want to look at those another time. There's only one thing left to talk about, and that's you can practice like very relaxed like that. You don't have to put your guard up. But when you do put your guard up, for most of your basic practicing, I'm just practicing in lines like that. Your guard just changes like that. And one of the things that's really, really hard to do, and particularly when it comes into sparring, is not do that. Don't lift your arms up like that. And the intent has got to adjust this, so that you don't do that, so that you don't drop the hands. That's become more of an issue as we look at round kick. Okay, we'll just do that.